I commend this bill to the House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the honourable member Andrew Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I take a call on behalf of New Zealand First on the State Sector Reform Public Finance Bill, and can I also concur with some of the other members in this House to say how boring it was to hear the Honourable Jonathan Coleman delivering his obviously written speech that was prepared by obviously somebody other than himself, and where it was the equivalent of watching paint dry or watching the grass on the front lawn grow. And it was certainly not riveting stuff in terms of reforming the state sector. And in regards to this, can I firstly say that New Zealand First, while we do appreciate the need to always find greater efficiencies in any part of government, whether it be central government or local government. However, we do not support the way this is going about this with the national government in terms of these state sector reforms. This large, very wide-ranging, complex omnibus bill purports to be providing the legislative basis for better public services and also strengthening the legislative framework. However, yes, there are lots and lots of fine words and empty phrases, but they are just empty phrases in this bill. It talks about more collaboration among government departments. It talks about sharing functions and services. It talks about sharing purchasing goods and services, logistics, more efficient, effective systems, and greater financial and reporting flexibility, and on it goes. But much of it is simply talk, Mr. Speaker. Much of it is just lip service. Much of it is, again, window glossing by this national government to, again, move the deck chairs on the Titanic so that they look like they're doing something. They look like they're seen to be doing something, but in actual fact, it's just window glossing over what is a tragic situation. It is the Mikhail Lermontov about to hit the rocks in the Marlborough Sound situation, and so they say it's all fine, it's all glossy, we're all on the red carpet at Hobbitville down in Wellington today, everything's roses, but actual fact, things are grim. And down in the engine room of the Mikhail Lermontov, down in the engine room of the Titanic, things are looking pretty grim. They give the same old buzzwords: efficiency, simplify, collaborate, logistics, flexibility, streamline, improved governance. The rhetoric goes on and on and on. And we hear it from every minister. We hear it whether it's the education minister, whether it's the health minister, whether it's the state services minister, whether it's the building and construction minister. They all give the same rhetoric, but at the end of the day, things in New Zealand are not getting better. These cutbacks will continue across the public service from this government, and we will see that, and the fabric of our public sector will continue to fray. And the downgrading of our public sector will see the resulting degradation of society in New Zealand. That same thinking, or should we say lack of thinking, has seen the likes of the Pike River coal mine disaster, where there was a reduction in mines inspectors. It has seen the Rena ship disaster, where again our agencies, Maritime New Zealand, weren't up with the play, didn't have the resources, didn't have a response vessel available to react to it, and didn't have the processes in place to react to that. The same thinking and the same lack of thinking has seen leaky homes come from the national government, the former national government of the 1990s, and carried on through to this national government, who similarly wants to reduce, under the Building Amendment Act, wants to reduce compliance in terms of building, but in so doing, we will have leaky homes revisited Part 2 in the next 10 years, because what they're doing under the Building Amendment Act similarly is downgrading the standards of building in this country, so that all the 1990s 2000 homes that are currently leaking, we'll have the 2012-15 homes leaking in 10 years' time. But fortunately, most of them over there won't be in government by then. They'll be well gone. In fact, they'll be gone back to the Wairarapa and wherever else they come from, because they'll be well gone. And some of us who are still of an age that can respond to the situation will have to pick up the pieces. And we'll have to pick up the pieces on behalf of good working Kiwi people, Kiwi husbands and wives, families and hard-working Kiwis who will say once again, how did the national government invoke this on New Zealand, wind down the public service to a level where incompetent decisions were made? And it's interesting, Mr. Speaker, that when you start reading through this very lengthy bill, it's something like 121 pages, that there's some real hidden pitfalls in this. And while they say this is going to be more efficient and we're going to, cut down the public service, we're going to do all this, there's some real fishhooks in this bill, Mr. Speaker. And I would challenge some of the National Party people over there to refer to. They've probably never opened it. Have you opened the bill, any of you? But clause 6, part J says function of the Commissioner. For the purpose of carrying out the Commissioner's role, this is the State Services Commissioner, the principal functions of the Commissioner are to, and then part J says, exercise such other functions with respect to the administration and management of the public service as the Prime Minister from time to time directs, not being functions conferred by this Act or any other Act on the Chief Executive other than the Commissioner. So in other words, one little clause hidden right in amongst here gives the Prime Minister absolute, ultimate power to turn to the State Services Commissioner and say, oi, into my office, up to the 9th floor, get up here quick, I want you to do this. And under clause 6J, he says, forget all the acts, forget that we've got a parliament, forget that we've got a democracy, forget that we are part of a Westminster democracy, one of the oldest democracies in the world. Forget that New Zealanders, and we see them around the walls of this House, went off to battle to fight for democracy. Forget that, because under this Act, the Prime Minister says, oi, he says, I've got ultimate power over you, and I think you should do this. And not you, Mr. Speaker, because you would never do that. You would never, ever, I know you would never do that. But Jonky, as we all know him, Jonky would do that, because he runs a shonky-jonky government. And under a shonky-jonky government, shonky-jonky would get the State Commissioner up to the 9th floor of the Beehive, and he would say, I'm going to exercise my right to tell you, in respect to the administration and management of the public service, that I think you should do this. And that is appalling. And this is the sort of legislation that this government is putting through. Donkey. This bill is not a solution for anything. Rather, it entrenches current problems. This bill will not stop the erosion and undermining of the public sector. This bill creates an illusion of progress and improvement, but the evidence to support it is missing. There is no clear and compelling case that this bill takes us to better and more cost-effective public services. No, we do not want a bloated public sector. Certainly we don't want a bloated public sector. But also, we do not want a hollowed-out state services sector where we end up with more Pike Rivers, where we end up more RENA disasters, where we end up with more leaky homes, and we end up where the bureaucracy simply is not controlling the functions of New Zealand. Mr. Speaker, New Zealand First will not support this bill.
That's right.
Speaker. I call the honourable member John